Home was a place where everybody was equal and where everybody was welcome. This was the setting in Sharon King's house growing up in the 50s and 60s, being born in 1951 and becoming a teenager and a young woman in the 1960s. She was able to experience a massive cultural change, social change in the United States, and got to embark on a journey that is part of history, part of our popular culture. And similarly to the decade of the 60s, 2016, our modern pop culture is very similar and very parallel to that. The 60s were a decade of uncertainty, unrest, not knowing what was around the corner or what to expect. Uh, Her mom, Marge, moved to Nevada from Little Rock, Arkansas in 1949 and was very aware of the social, racial, civil issues that were prominent in the South and across the greater part of the United States. The Western states were more liberal and more open, and that's where she wanted to raise her family because of those reasons, and humidity and venomous water snakes. So, growing up in the early 60s, all of the events seemed to coincide with each other, the social and political events. Uh, One wasn't itself without all of the others, for as tumultuous and awful as some of the times were, with change in any regard, in any aspect. This is very common. The metamorphosis of a caterpillar into a butterfly isn't the most beautiful process, but a rough beginning oftentimes leads to a beautiful result. So, one of the things Sharon spoke about was the JFK Nixon debate that they watched on TV. Uh, the evening time was family time in front of the television. The nightly news was where everybody got their information from, where they got their news from. Uh, they used TV trays, which dates uh, that generation itself. You don't see too many of those anymore. And the whole family would get together, and it was their time to unwind, talk, and process what was going on in the world. This was a new era, and it didn't seem profound at the time to watch a debate like that, but in hindsight, looking back, she recollects how important and how changing that event actually was. The Vietnam War was going on when she was in high school. That was her first experience, and a lot of her family and friends' first experience with the loss of loved ones to war. It wasn't just an idea, it wasn't something you read about in textbooks. It was an actual event that affected countless lives. She lost friends, lost family. Her brother was shipped off and fortunately survived that. But it was a monumental event, and she didn't participate in any anti-war demonstrations or protests, but she was against the war and the retrieval of the U.S. troops. Uh, there were so many things happening that were cyclical. All of the civil rights movements uh, were going on, and the civil rights and Vietnam happening at the same time. Uh, were probably the most prominent events for her and for most of the nation. Women rights uh, were grouped into those movements. Martin Luther King, civil rights, anti-war protests, experienced firsthand all of those facets. Uh, as mentioned earlier, Marge was exposed to racism growing up in Arkansas, and she didn't want that environment for her family here in Nevada. Everybody was equal, and she didn't want that hate and distinction. So when Sharon watched those events unfold on national television, that was eye-opening to her that a large part of our country experienced this segregation, this hatred that wasn't part of life in Henderson. Um, the way that all panned out on TV was unique because it wasn't like that at home, and they got to experience and see things for the first time. Um, the space program was huge. Um, Beatles, she's the biggest Beatles fan I know, and she said that it was fun music. It promoted freedom and youth, but there were a lot of other things going on, and that was more of a counterbalance to reality than anything else. Uh, those social aspects affected her and shaped her to who she is today. She still has copies of Time magazine with the Vietnam War, Beatles, Martin Luther King, civil rights, notations, and covers. She saved all that for the idea that it was eclectic, that it was unique, and probably that it would be worth money sometime, but more importantly, she wanted to show us as her children. Um, the JFK assassination was huge because this was played on the nightly news every night over and over again. That was the news, and this is prior to social media and prior to our technology that we experience today. So it was very in your face, and to watch his assassin be assassinated on national television just a few days later, it left so much uncertainty that the world was scary for everybody. Uh, Test site was just north of Las Vegas, nuclear test site, military test site, and they can recall seeing flashes uh, at sunset just past the valley, which is fairly unique. Um, that was the time they were living in. They practiced bomb runs and drills, just like we would fire drills today, but they were nuclear fallout drills, nuclear explosion drills. Uh, there was plans and plan A, plan B, plan C of if a bomb does go off, if there is a nuclear war, this is where we're going to meet. And if this is the case and this algorithm doesn't work out, then this is what we're going to do next. So there was a lot of forecasting and worry. As soon as groceries and supplies were brought to the store during the Cold War era, these were bought up almost immediately. In Henderson and Las Vegas, bomb shelters, just like everywhere else across the United States, were going up faster than homes were being built. So that was the world then. Very similar to today in 2016, where we are concerned about active shooters, where we are concerned about terrorists and different motives and plots, and how to prevent these things, how to stay aware, how to recognize danger, and how to do all those very critical life-saving techniques and plans without being overtly racist or hurting too many feelings while doing it, while profiling. So it's a very similar world that we're in today that we were, or that they were back in the 60s, 50s, 70s, all throughout the course of time. Today, violence is violence, and opinions are synonymous with facts. That's something that's different. That we are basing our judgment off of other people's opinions, impressions, what their media sponsors and advertisers and producers want us to hear and learn, and that goes for all of our media, social media, Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, you name it. So what comes to mind is Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, uh, cable TV. It's owned by people, and people are typically driven by money. So it's a strange dynamic, but it's very similar in a lot of ways. Um, in conclusion, I just wanted to address the dynamic of the '60s and how it changed the nation, provided you with a brief history of the environment in which my mom grew up in which shaped her, and in turn shaped myself. Uh, in this video speech, uh, hopefully I reflected on Sharon and what she was exposed to, and how that decade shaped a nation, brought personal insight to a home isolated in a small desert community, and how it's very similar and contrasting to the '60s with 2016 in modern pop culture. Uh, in closing, um, reality is that regardless of time frame, decade, and the age, gender, subject, we're all products of our environment. That doesn't mean that we have the power to make changes. It does mean that we must be strong as individuals and strong as a team, as a nation, as a planet, and be a driving force and a catalyst for change that we want, that's positive, and the fuel to keep that motivation going. Thank you for your time, and I apologize, this is twice as long as it was supposed to be.